Imagine this. You're standing in front of a mirror, but you're not really looking at yourself. You're scanning, judging your posture, your choices, your past. You wonder what they think of you, whoever they are. Somewhere along the way, their voices got louder than your own. You post a picture, then check for likes. You say yes when your soul screams no. You wake up tired, not from work, but from performing endlessly. Now imagine this instead. You stop caring, not out of bitterness, not because you've given up, but because something inside you finally wakes up and whispers, none of this ever mattered the way you thought it did. And then something bizarre happens. The tension in your chest loosens. You laugh easier. People listen when you speak. Doors open, not because you forced them, but because you stopped banging. Why does it feel like the less you care, the more everything works? What if the moment you release control is the exact moment everything begins to align? Here's the paradox. We've been conditioned to care our way to freedom. Work harder, stress more, hustle, please, prove. But what if that's the trap? What if your obsession with getting it right is the only thing keeping you from getting anything at all? So ask yourself, what would your life look like if you truly stopped caring, not out of apathy, but out of clarity? To find that answer, we must trace the roots into the twisted architecture of the mind that made you this way. From the moment you were born, you were given invisible scripts. Be good. Be liked. Do what's expected. They weren't shouted. They were whispered, modeled, ingrained. You learned that love was conditional, that approval had to be earned, that your worth depended on how well you performed for others. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But most people never get close, because instead of becoming, they perform. Instead of living, they manage impressions. Their sense of self, a fragile collage of what parents, teachers, society demanded they become. This is not your fault. It's how the world programs you. Through fear of rejection, through reward for obedience, through punishment of authenticity. The moment you stepped out of line, someone flinched, someone withdrew love. And you learned it's safer to fit in than to be free. Philosophers like Jean-Paul Sartre wrote about bad faith, the human tendency to deny our freedom and responsibility by hiding behind roles. The worker, the daughter, the achiever, the good citizen. These roles give us structure, but they also bury us alive. Because somewhere deep inside, we know none of them are truly us. And so we overcare. Not because we're compassionate, but because we're terrified. Caring becomes compulsive. You care what strangers think because your identity depends on their gaze. You care about failure because you believe it defines you. You care about being liked because somewhere along the line, you confused being liked with being safe. But here's the devastating truth. This addiction to caring is a trauma response, a psychological defense, a survival strategy dressed up as virtue. The problem isn't that you care, it's that you were never taught when to stop. And as long as your self-worth is tied to things outside of you, approval, performance, perfection, you'll remain trapped in an endless loop of anxiety and self-betrayal. But this isn't the end of the story. This is the unmasking of it. Because the deeper you see this truth, the closer you come to something radical. Freedom, authenticity, and a terrifying kind of peace. You don't notice it at first. The damage isn't loud. It's subtle, like erosion. It starts with a hesitation before you speak, a glance to check how others react before you laugh. Soon, it becomes a way of life. You're living in reaction, not intention. You're not choosing, you're calculating, and that's how you lose yourself. Psychologists call it external locus of control, the belief that your life is dictated by outside forces. It's not just disempowering, it's disorienting. Because when everything depends on others' approval, you become a puppet, tugged by invisible strings you handed to everyone else. One critic ruins your day. One compliment determines your worth. Your nervous system doesn't know the difference between rejection and danger. The same cortisol, the same racing heart, the same fight-or-flight mechanism activates when your boss frowns or your post gets ignored. You're biologically wired for survival. But in modern life, survival has been hijacked by social validation. This is where the tragedy deepens. Cognitive biases reinforce it. The spotlight effect makes you think everyone's watching. Confirmation bias ensures you see rejection everywhere. And cultural conditioning wraps it all in a shiny bow, telling you this is ambition, drive, being a go-getter. But it's not. It's a slow bleed of your identity. And the consequences? You never rest. Not truly. You say yes when you mean no. You shrink when you should rise. You become allergic to stillness, because in the silence, you might hear your real voice, and it terrifies you. On the outside, you may appear successful, respected, put together. But inside, there's a war between the self you perform and the self that waits quietly, patiently to be remembered. This is the cost of caring too much. You live your whole life as someone else. But what if the chaos in your mind isn't a sign that something's wrong with you, but a signal that you've been swimming against your nature? You've followed every rule they gave you. But what if the rules were the cage? Now, what happens when you start to disobey? It begins in a moment so quiet, most people miss it. You're scrolling, nodding, agreeing, apologizing, pleasing. Then something flickers. A question, a breath. A rebellion so small it almost goes unnoticed. What if I just didn't? Didn't explain yourself? Didn't smile when you didn't feel like it? Didn't answer that message right away? Didn't try so hard to be enough? That's how the revolution starts. Not with noise, but with silence. The kind of silence that dares to make room for you. You see, the system feeds on your fear. The brands, the bosses, the algorithms, the social masks, all of them depend on you caring too much about your image, your performance, your productivity, your polished, curated self. But when you stop playing the game, the rules lose their power. Nietzsche said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." But to find your why, you must first let all the false ones die. The whys they gave you to keep you tame, be successful, be liked, be admired. Replace them with a new one. Be real. This isn't apathy. It's awakening. It's when you start saying no, not out of anger, but alignment. When you stop chasing and begin attracting. When you leave the party early, speak with blunt honesty. Wear what makes you feel alive. And watch how the world adjusts. Not because you demanded it, but because you stopped asking permission. History favors the ones who didn't care to fit in. The misfits, the artists, the prophets, the revolutionaries. They weren't careless. They were clear. They knew that peace doesn't come from finally being accepted. It comes from finally accepting yourself. So stop explaining. Let them misunderstand you. Let them call it selfish or arrogant or cold. They don't know what freedom looks like yet. And when you stop caring in the right way, you don't collapse. You rise, unapologetically, unshakably. Because the moment you stop being everything to everyone, you become everything to yourself. Here is the truth no one tells you. The moment you stop caring is not the moment you disconnect from the world. It's the moment you return to it. But this time, on your terms. Because underneath the pressure, beneath the performance, behind all the masks, you were always there. Waiting, watching, silent. The real you. The unchangeable, untouchable core of your being. And all this time, it was buried under layers of fear disguised as ambition, approval seeking sold as love, noise mistaken for purpose. When you let go of caring, what you're really letting go of is the illusion. The illusion that you're not enough. The illusion that worth is earned. The illusion that your identity must be proven, rather than remembered. Arthur Schopenhauer once wrote, "A man can do what he wills, but he cannot will what he wills." You don't choose your deepest truths. They emerge when you stop resisting them. And here is yours. You were never meant to be everything to everyone. You were never meant to win love through performance. You were never meant to carry your way into belonging. You belong when you no longer need to. Letting go is not weakness. It is the highest form of strength. It's the courage to live untethered, to show up without armor, to be seen in your contradictions, your rawness, your truth. Because what if life doesn't fall into place when you control it? But when you trust it, when you release the grip, when you stop striving, when you stop performing and finally fully arrive, not at the destination they promised you, but at yourself. So stop running, stop reaching, sit down, breathe. There is nothing to prove. The person you were trying to become was always the one you already are. Waiting patiently beneath the weight of everything you thought you had to be. And now that you've stopped caring, now finally you are free.